20 years ago, the world hailed 5 heroes, the Golden Seekers, champions who sealed the Great Dungeon and ended the era of monsters. But history lies, because the man who led them was betrayed by his own team. Misato Kyoichiro, humanity's greatest hope, was framed as the villain and sealed beneath the earth. His name erased, his comrades reborn as the Pentagram Saints, bathing in the glory they stole, until now. When his eyes open again, he's no longer the hero of legend. He's a student named Asai Kyusuke, weak, mocked, forgotten. But inside him burns the forbidden power of the void, the ability to turn imagination into reality. He enters Tokugo Academy, hiding behind a smile, waiting, watching, while the saints' disciples mock him as trash. Every insult feeds his fury. Every test reveals a glimpse of the monster they created. He shows the world that the sealed hero never died. He just learned how to kill without mercy. The academy trembles. The saints whisper his name. And in the shadows, Misato marks his next target. They took his glory. They stole his legacy. But this time, he's taking everything back. Betrayed once, reborn twice. Now, vengeance begins. In this tale, following a second chance at life, the main character discovers an extraordinary power that sets them apart from others. All of his thoughts would take shape and turn into reality. As an illustration, someone might use it to mend an injury. He simply has to picture it as already mended. Achieving an ideal physique could be accomplished without any exercise at all. It was only a product of imagination, the ability to control any form of elemental magic. He only pictures himself performing the spell in his mind. He possessed the ability to call forth any weapon or artifact at will. Simply imagining the scene was enough. At first, the outcome was far from flawless. Despite its flaws, the skill still required improvement through leveling up. Luckily, he finds himself inhabiting the body of a different person. A young person attended an academy where magic was taught. He now had ample opportunity to fully develop control over his abilities. By doing this, he would be able to get ready and seek vengeance against the people responsible for his demise long ago. The events that unfolded next were as follows. Mysterious dungeon gates unexpectedly emerged across the globe on that day. Monsters began to flood out of the dungeons, overwhelming humanity, who found themselves defenseless against the terrifying creatures. The responsibility to halt their advance fell solely on individuals who had discovered their own magical powers. Within this group stood the Golden Seekers, renowned for their great strength and their mission to defend the world against the most formidable monsters. Among them were Lei stood among the legendary 5, wielding incredible abilities to vanquish any creature daring to invade the world of humans. However, their actions did not always align with what was best for everyone else, as their true motivations often remained unclear. A helpless civilian found themselves trapped, as one of the monsters blocked any chance of escape. Instructed to assist the victims, yet felt so indifferent toward them that she remained motionless. The man appeared to be moments away from falling into the clutches of a menacing ogre. The last teammate delivered a powerful kick that smashed in the creature's face. The person also held the position of leader among the Golden Seekers, flashed a confident smile, and assured the group that he would handle the remaining monsters on his own. After confirming the safety of everyone around him, he jumps down and begins gathering a powerful surge of energy in his hand, preparing to unleash it. He harnessed its power, barreling through the horde of monsters with unstoppable force, demolishing every one of them in an instant. The rest of the group looks on in amazement while he single-handedly defeats the enormous swarm of monsters, though his overwhelming strength comes as no surprise to them. Thanks to his mastery of time magic, he possessed the ability to glimpse into the future, allowing him to predict every move the monster would make. Had reached a point where her power surpassed anything human. Within minutes, the city streets became littered with the lifeless bodies of the defeated monsters. Faced the last creature, and it was defeated with the same ease as the ones before. His tension faded as relief washed over him, knowing that he had successfully safeguarded the peace of the people. Only one task remained for him. He had to close the gate to stop any additional monsters from entering. Just as he finished sealing it, something happened. A powerful explosion hurled him through the air, propelling him straight into the depths of the dungeon. He became imprisoned by the very seal he had created. His 5 teammates stood outside the dungeon, unconcerned as they observed him from a distance. Despite possessing the ability to manipulate time, he stood in awe, realizing that the future before him was unlike anything he had ever imagined. He approached the seal, demanding to know whether they had all conspired together in this awful scheme, and questioning their reasons for treating him so badly. For them, the solution stood out without question. His constant urge to protect everyone had repeatedly put his team at risk. He eventually reached level 100 and mastered time-based magic, while his teammates remained focused solely on making money. The group had finally lost patience with him, deciding the moment had come to lock him away so they could concentrate on their plans for world domination, instead of worrying about the people's welfare. As the team strode away, their laughter echoed behind them, mocking the man who faced his impending death. Slams his fists against the seal, urgently pleading for someone to save him. However, the others turn their backs on him, not offering a single glance as they leave. Shocked and hurt, struggles to accept that they have abandoned him purely out of their own self-interest. He devoted himself to defending the world from monsters, making every sacrifice for its safety. He struggled to comprehend why they would treat him this way, especially after all they had experienced together. He quickly realizes there is no time to find a solution, as the dungeon's monsters begin to sense his entrapment and move toward him with growing menace. Reacts on impulse, preparing herself to defend against the attackers. However, he finds himself facing an enormous barrier formed by fierce, ravenous creatures. He taps into his ability to see the future, searching for a timeline in which he manages to make it out alive. No matter which future unfolded, each one concluded with his inevitable demise. His destiny appeared to have vanished entirely, leaving him facing what truly seemed to be his final moments. Is determined to face whatever comes her way with courage, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. With a gleaming fist wreathed in gold, he charged headlong toward the monsters. Fueled by resolve, he set out to defeat as many of his adversaries as possible, hoping to reshape what lay ahead. Despite having already overcome hundreds, he now faced thousands more who continued to advance toward him. Kneeling on the ground, with his blood spreading beneath him, he comes to understand that he has no option left except to embrace his own end. Even with death looming over him, he was determined not to let this be the end. While the creatures swarmed over him, he fought desperately, determined that his sacrifice would have a purpose. He gathered the energy of time magic within himself, determined to be reborn and grow more powerful. He aimed to attain the highest level of his power. After his reincarnation, he is certain to seek vengeance on those who wronged him. The anger and hopelessness festering within him will only intensify, building up until the moment arrives when he can finally make them pay. With a determined effort, he unleashed the power of time magic, flooding the surroundings with a radiant, golden glow. Blinked awake to find himself inhabiting a much younger body, surrounded by unfamiliar surroundings. He rises from the hospital bed. He glanced at his reflection, noticing that his new body featured a youthful face and cropped hair. As he rests his hand against the surface of the mirror, he comes to the realization that his plan for reincarnation has succeeded exactly as he had hoped. At present, he found himself inside a hospital, yet the medications lining the shelves were unlike any he recognized. Judging by the passage of time since the event, he guessed that years had slipped by, and silently wished that not too much time had passed. He still had the chance to get back at those who had turned their backs on him. A table stood next to the bed. He discovers a student identification card, likely from the person who once inhabited the body he now occupies. By examining the date printed on the card, he realizes that more than 2 decades have passed since the event occurred. This indicated that there was likely enough time left for him to locate them. The student went by the name and possessed a level 1 void attribute. Upon noticing that particular attribute, erupted into wild laughter, his luck seemingly soaring. In his former life, his unmatched strength and mastery over time made even his allies wary of him. However, as his abilities grew, he came to understand that he had reached the limits of his power. Although his clairvoyance revealed every secret of the world, he still remained blind to the full extent of the void attribute's power. although the body he now inhabits holds an enigmatic strength, can't help but pity him. The void attribute remained shrouded in mystery, its rarity making it unfamiliar territory where no one had yet discovered a way to harness or develop its power. This might explain why the boy remains stuck at level 1. He had likely faced ridicule more than once for lacking any attributes, all the while being unaware that he actually possessed the most powerful one of all. With a clear understanding of his current predicament, silently vowed to the boy he once was that he would become famous across the globe as the greatest adventurer in history. With the help of his clairvoyant powers, understands the method for mastering the void attribute. With this newfound power, he would rise to become the most powerful person on Earth. After he transformed his frail, level 1 body through intense training, he would achieve true strength. He planned to ensure that those who had betrayed him in his previous life would deeply regret their actions and the role they played in his demise. Masada realized that, to carry out his plan for revenge, he needed to help this boy advance beyond level 1. In his previous life, Masada had easily surpassed his enemies in strength, but now he found himself limited to the abilities of an ordinary teenager. The void attribute referred to a form of magic that allowed someone to manipulate the essence of nothingness itself. The power granted the individual the capacity to transform their thoughts and fantasies into tangible reality without restriction. People often find it easy to dream up ideas, yet bringing those dreams to life proves to be the real challenge. Found himself fortunate that the body he now inhabited was seriously wounded. This situation provided him with an opportunity to test his newfound powers by attempting to heal his own injuries. He simply needs to picture the image in his mind and focus on transferring it to his body, imagining his wounds gradually mending themselves. When he concentrates, he envisions magic renewing each individual cell within his body. He carefully directed the magic toward his arm, watching as the large bruise gradually faded and his skin began to mend. The casting was still basic at this stage, which meant that the healing process remained slow. He observed that the inner part of the arm had not completely recovered, yet the improvement remained quite encouraging. Should he persist in utilizing his healing power to recover from every injury, his strength would gradually rise as time passed. Over time, as he kept using his power, he would become better at bringing his imagination to life. With each level gained, the range of images he could transform into reality would expand even further. With consistent progress, he would gain the ability to craft a wide variety of objects, which would one day allow him to master numerous forms of magic. In time, technology would advance enough for any image a person imagined to be brought flawlessly into existence. While considering how he might use his newfound powers, a doctor rushed into the room, eyes wide with surprise upon seeing that the patient had regained consciousness at last. Attempts to rise from his seat, but the doctor insists he remain seated, reminding him that his injuries from the monster attack are severe. Was just now learning about the fate of the previous inhabitant of his body, and he could tell from the way it was described that it must have been something truly terrible. The doctor could hardly believe the patient had regained consciousness, his surprise clear as he considered the recovery nothing short of miraculous. In his mind, he credited the saintess's blessing for this unexpected turn of events. For the first time encountered the term saintess. To the doctor, this information was well known, so he was surprised that was unaware of her existence. Carried the title of saintess among the pentagram saints, though she herself remained unaware of what that truly meant. The doctor just attributes his lack of basic knowledge to the fact that he just regained consciousness after sustaining severe injuries. For now, he switches the topic to giving a thorough examination. As he leaves, can't shake the thought of these pentagram saints out of his mind. Maybe they are one of the clans or adventurers that came to be in the past 20 years. While he's focused on leveling up, he also needs to get a grasp of what has changed over the past 2 decades. He grabs a remote from the bedside table and tunes to a new station. It's coincidentally playing a special program about the triple S-class dungeon disaster that happened 20 years ago. That's exactly what he needs information on, and he needs to know what happened after he was betrayed. The broadcast states that the culprit of the disaster was the leader of the Golden Seekers, himself. jumps out of bed in shock as he sees his own face plastered on the TV screen. He has no idea what they are talking about and keeps listening. Apparently, the news that went around was that he predicted the upcoming disaster, but refused to tell anyone about it. Instead, he was planning to take advantage of the impending chaos that would sweep the world in order to take charge and rule it. To stop this, the other members of the Golden Seekers came together and fought him to prevent this from happening. After defeating, the remaining members of the Golden Seekers renamed themselves as the Pentagram Saints, and after a fierce battle, they sealed the dungeon and saved the world. This false truth is a common knowledge now that the whole world knows about, and the Pentagram Saints have gone on to lead the world in many different areas. Turns off the news broadcast and stares out the window in shock. The shock turns to uncontrollable laughter as he figures out just what happened while he was gone. Not only did they betray him, they also dragged his name and dignity through the mud. They sacrificed him and shamelessly reaped the rewards. In the end, now they are being hailed by the world as heroes while he's rotting. With this new news, he is definitely not going to forgive them. Now he has to make sure that all of them go to hell one by one. But he has to calm himself down before he goes overboard. After all, he can't get detected by them since he is way too weak to take them on as he is right now. The first thing he has to figure out is where they are and how he can get to them. He takes the boy's phone and scans through it to figure out what academy he attends, just as he thought. He attends Adventurer Training Academy, which is headed by one of the Pentagram Saints. He just woke up, and now he has already located one of the Saints so easily. He's a cautious man, though, and he's not the type of person that would just show his weaknesses so easily. On top of that, the difference in their levels is just too great. Beating him as he is right now is pretty much impossible. For now, he has to focus on growing his levels and becoming stronger. He can't do anything at level 1, but once he grows to an acceptable range, then he will make sure that is the first target. A few weeks pass, and eventually is fully recovered and preparing to be discharged. The doctor can't believe that he made such a speedy recovery, despite how badly injured he was. He starts to think that was once again blessed by the Saintess, but our MC cuts him off before he can finish that sentence. He wants the doctor to know for sure that everything that he has achieved so far was thanks to his own power. With that, he leaves the hospital, bidding farewell to the doctor for the last time as he walks out. Now that he's done with the bare bones preparation for his plan, he's ready to take things to the next level. He has also managed to raise his level up to 27. It's time for him to get a warm-up and test his new abilities by heading to a dungeon. Before he left the hospital, he heard from the doctor that all of his family had died in an accident. It's tragic but it makes things so much easier since that means that he can do whatever he wants, and he doesn't have to worry about anyone questioning his actions. As soon as he makes his way out of the hospital, he heads over to the nearest dungeon gate to start his first adventure. He has to make sure that he levels up and grows stronger as fast as possible. Now that he has grown his level by healing himself, it's time for him to test out his new skills in actual combat. He heads over to the stall by the gate where the security guard grants permission to enter, and he shows his student ID card. The guard grabs his hand to stop him before he can continue into the gate. He's worried about entering the dungeon, since he's only level 27, and this dungeon is usually a place where adventurers have to be at least level 30 to form up parties and enter the dungeon. Despite the strict regulations, plans to enter the dungeon alone, which to the guard is essentially the same as suicide. That would be true for anyone with a normal class, but is a student from the Adventurer Training Academy, and that should give him special permissions to enter this place, despite how dangerous it is. As long as he signs a consent form, it should be fine for him to enter without any restrictions. He knew something like this would happen when he approached the dungeon gate, so he looked up the special privileges he gets as a student of the school, and this is one of many. The guard has no choice but to let him through. But that doesn't change the fact that he's worried. Some voices call out to him from the other side of the compound. A group of thuggish-looking kids tells that the guard is just worried about him, so he shouldn't take it to heart. After all, He's just a weak student that hasn't even graduated from the academy yet, so he should know his place. Only spares them one glance before he turns around and asks the guard where he's supposed to sign. He puts his signature and leaves to enter the dungeon after confirming that there shouldn't be any more issues. The guard watches our MC leaves and then calls out to the kids from earlier and tells them to head into the dungeon and follow. He can't get over the fact that just allowing a kid to walk in there unprotected is basically suicide. At first, they try to argue with the guard, since they are not willing to risk their necks for someone they barely know. But the leader among them stops his friends from making a big fuss. This might end up being good for them at the end of the day. If nobody is watching them inside the dungeon, then they can head in there and do whatever they want. Even if something terrible were to happen in there wouldn't be problems or consequences. His friends immediately understand what he's talking about, and they happily rush into the dungeon to follow. Now they can pay him back for being such a brat to them and trying to attempt a dungeon that should be way above his level. The guard cheerfully sends them, completely unaware of their true intentions. This isn't the first time that they have done this. They kill the people that make their way into the dungeon, and then blame it on the monsters. Thanks to that, they can line their pockets handsomely, and no one is any wiser about it. With that in mind, they continue chasing after. But 10 minutes of running later, they still haven't caught up to him. The dungeon is a straight path, so it's impossible for them to have lost him, and at this point they have no idea how he has gotten so far away. Eventually, they finally catch up to him, and they see him surrounded by a wall of monsters. At first, they think that they won't have to kill him after all, and the monsters will take care of him for them. But proves them wrong by using fire magic, combined with wind magic, to kill all the monsters in a matter of seconds. They are shocked by the fact that he managed to kill so many D-ranked monsters at once. But they are also more interested in the massive loot drops that came from the monsters. If they sell that loot drop, then they can live comfortably for at least 6 months. His back is still turned to them, so they think that he hasn't noticed them yet. This is the perfect time for them to spring an attack and kill him so they can get the rare loot drop. The three spring into action and surround him. Then all at once, they unleash their magic at him. Finally turns around and gives them his attention, skillfully dodging all their attacks without wasting a second. He's used to these kinds of things already from his past life. No matter what era it is, there's always scum that tries to take what belongs to someone else. Since he dodged all their long-ranged attacks, one of them charges up a fireball and goes in close to take down with a magically enhanced punch. Is quicker, however, and charges his fist with ice, which he uses to punch the attacker square in the stomach, and send him flying back to his friends. The goon is taken down in a second, and left to rot at the back while turns and approaches the rest, who are now cowering in fear. In this new life, he won't be as merciful as he used to be. He plans to crush anyone that gets in his way, and then use them as a stepping stone to get to his next goal without hesitation. Everything that he will do from now on is all for the sake of his revenge. With the goons taken care of, leaves the dungeon completely unharmed. But the disappearance of the boys causes a teacher from the academy to come and check on what happened. The man is a subordinate of, and he got the news that one of his students entered the dungeon alone. Instead of finding his student struggling, though, he instead finds 3 novice hunter-adventurers lying dead on the ground. But there's no clues to explain what in the world happened in the dungeon. Back with, he looks through his new stats now that he managed to finish the dungeon. Thanks to clearing the D-rank dungeon, he was able to level up and test out his void magic at the same time. Now he has gained a new spell called Info Obscurity, which allows him to not only take his level, but also erase his dungeon entry records. Thanks to that, he can wipe any clues from the D-rank dungeon that could lead back to him. Now that he has moved on from that, tomorrow is his first day at the academy, and he needs to prepare for it. He takes a look through his phone and sees some unread messages from people that are clearly bullying him and extorting money from him through violence. That perfectly explains what has been through, and how he got in that sorry state. The following morning, he makes his way to school. He entered by making his way through the front gate. Upon entering, he encountered a cheerful girl who appeared familiar with him. This was one of his classmates, who hurried over to check on his well-being after his stay in the hospital. Despite facing many difficulties, he appeared to persevere. Was surrounded by individuals who felt concern for his well-being. While the two engaged in conversation, a group of bullies approached, intent on confronting him. They mocked him for lacking any special attribute, making it clear they knew he had only just managed to survive a near-death experience. It seemed highly probable that these individuals were the ones who had sent him ominous messages the previous evening. The main bully approaches the group, insisting that owes them money because they are always the ones looking out for him. The tension in the air makes it obvious that a confrontation is about to happen. Karen steps between and the bullies, attempting to shield him. She brings up the fact that has only recently left the hospital, hoping this will make them reconsider. Even though fear flickers in her eyes, she stands tall, determined to protect him. Her trembling hands revealed just how frightened she felt. The main character becomes aware of this. He moved to stand protectively in front of her, offering words of comfort as he promised that nothing would happen to him. The bullies burst into laughter, convinced that he is only putting on a show to impress a girl, interpreting his eagerness to display his skills as an attempt to appear cool. The bullies delighted in making sure he knew exactly where he stood at school. However, fate had a different plan for them. The others remained unaware that rise to power had altered the established order. When he assumed control of the boy's body, vowed to spread the boy's name across the globe by becoming the most formidable adventurer. Prided himself on always following through with his promises. He mocks the first bully. The approach proved to be highly effective. This action led him to direct a spell at. It was a violation of school policy to use magic anywhere other than inside the dungeons. The bullies appeared indifferent now, feeling it was necessary to teach a lesson about the consequences of acting out when someone lacked special traits. A blazing sphere of fire soared from his hand, hurtling straight toward the protagonist. Responds with a similar gesture. Responding to his move, she unleashed a fireball of greater size, causing both blasts to collide in a fierce showdown. A massive blast erupted as a result. The bullies found themselves confused, trying to figure out when had learned to control fire. Remains unfazed as the less powerful blows land, showing little reaction to their impact. The bully glanced at his friends and demanded that they quit standing idly by and start taking action. Both of them launched fierce blasts of wind and surging waves of water in its direction. However, the situation mirrored their interactions with their supervisor. Responded to both assaults by unleashing even more powerful attacks of his own. The observers struggled to comprehend how someone who recently lacked any magical attribute is now wielding several at the same time. Such an extraordinary ability is completely new to them. However, this was only the start. Had skillfully countered every assault by employing their own abilities to cancel out each attack. Now it was his chance to take control and launch his own attack. He began gathering energy, forming an enormous fireball at his back, hoping its sheer size would frighten his opponents. The creature's immense size intimidated the group, making them scramble to escape as he moved closer. Lunged forward and seized the nearest person, who was desperately calling out for help while attempting to escape. Without waiting for the boy's response, he questioned whether the boy had ever offered assistance when was in need. He seizes the other person's face firmly in his hand. He lifts the man off the ground, energy gathering in his clenched hand as a blazing fireball forms. In his mind, he dismisses any need to listen, certain that people like this always repeat the same excuses. No matter what words came out of his mouth, nothing could prevent from driving his fist straight into the other boy's face. He delivers a powerful strike directly at the boy. The force of the impact hurled him backward through the air. He was left unconscious in the academy courtyard. Karen struggles to recognize, noticing clear signs that he has become a different person than he once was. Would no longer be an easy target for people who tried to push him around. He is about to embark on his journey to become the most powerful adventurer. After witnessing true strength, the bullies were overcome with fear and pleaded frantically for mercy. Struggling to support their injured companion, they hobbled away from the courtyard in desperation. His demeanor had changed so drastically since leaving the hospital that it left everyone around him in disbelief. Let out a disappointed sigh, realizing that, despite all the rumors, the bully was not as impressive as everyone had claimed. He entered the school alongside Karen, fully aware that every student in the halls had witnessed his actions in the courtyard. As he walked by, everyone fixed their eyes on him, quietly murmuring to one another. Caught sight of the stairs, and began to question whether his flashy display had drawn unwanted attention to himself. While he walked alongside Karen, a figure pushed through the bustling crowd, attempting to reach him before he stepped into his classroom. Walked over too, intending to ask him a few questions before their class began. Couldn't recognize the stranger, though the boy's appearance suggested he was an upperclassman. Felt certain that interacting with him would only lead to trouble. He chooses to ignore the offer to talk, turning away and explaining that there isn't time to chat because class is about to begin. However, remains determined and refuses to accept rejection. He revealed that he was the head of Biting the Cat, a group that principal had established for the school. Notices right away. Just as he is about to open the door, his hand comes to a sudden halt, realizing that the main character is now watching him. He inquires once more if might be open to a short conversation and could offer a bit of his time. With the situation now different, feels cheerful and accepts the opportunity to talk with his seniors. The two of them seek out a quiet spot where no one can overhear. Without wasting any time, directly questions, wanting to know if he was responsible for defeating the adventurers discovered dead in the D-rank dungeon. RMC pretended not to understand what was happening. Although he appeared calm, he questioned how the secret he had worked so hard to hide had been discovered. Had learned from the staff that one of the academy's students had ventured into the dungeon, so he decided to go inside and look into the situation himself. Within the dungeon, he discovered the remains of notorious criminals who had gained a reputation for preying on beginners. Less than 10 minutes earlier, battled his classmates by wielding a variety of abilities, although each of these facts was accurate. His method of showing his evidence made it clear that he lacked detailed knowledge about the main character's magic, and he was also unable to provide any solid proof that he was truly responsible for defeating the novice adventurers. His frustration intensified as he demanded that confess and reveal the truth about his actions. Despite the tension, the main character stayed composed, explaining that earlier that morning, he had only tried to protect himself and wasn't entirely sure about the details of what had occurred. He slips his hand inside his jacket and retrieves a student ID card, which he has modified to display a false level. According to the information on his ID card, he is listed as only level 1, indicating that he shouldn't have the strength required to accomplish the actions he is being blamed for. In addition to everything else, he possessed the Void attribute, a type of magic widely regarded as useless, almost as if having no magical power at all. Its insignificance and the sense that time is being squandered by him stir frustration in. He turned away to go, expressing regret for having summoned him without a real purpose. Before departing, he cautions to behave normally, emphasizing the importance of not causing any difficulties for the... Smiled as he watched the older students walk away. He appeared to have discovered a person who could help advance his ambitions. The senior realized that gaining control over would let him get closer to without alerting the principal. Now, he needed to come up with a plan to turn into his pawn. He realized that this moment offered an ideal opportunity to try the new experimental spell he had been developing for some time. At the same time, made his way to principal's office to deliver a report about the events that had unfolded in the D-rank dungeon. Principal listened quietly, not interrupting as explained what had happened. The speaker pointed out that rarely made errors, subtly drawing attention to how out of character his recent slip was. He had repeatedly cautioned those under his command to exercise caution when deciding whom to trust for important tasks. lowered his head in a respectful bow before the principal, expressing regret for his errors and assuring her that he would work quickly to resolve the situation. Approaches the person working under him. He kept bowing respectfully and warned that if people discovered his involvement with adventurers targeting beginners, the consequences would also affect the principal, who held the esteemed title of Pentagram Saint. He reached out and seized the student by the face. He warns him that repeated errors like this will lead to his immediate dismissal. Lowered his head in a deeper bow, signaling to the older man that he grasped what was being said. Outwardly, his manner appeared respectful and obedient. Internally, simmers with frustration over having to handle the elderly man. He regrets not foreseeing that events would unfold in this way. He likely would have attempted to extract additional hush money from the inexperienced hunters. With the main topics already covered, remained unconvinced by Sakount. Based on the information he provided, it appeared that the person responsible for all the trouble was likely a junior. According to the records, none of the third-year students had gone into the dungeon recently. Suspicions began to surface. While the group had been preoccupied with targeting novices, a monster managed to overpower them, and now was frantically attempting to conceal what had happened. It seemed far more believable that was making up a story to protect his reputation than to assume any academy student could single-handedly defeat novice hunters. His judgment would only fail under extraordinary circumstances. His mind flashes back instantly. The student with the void attribute who had appeared earlier. He wonders aloud to whether a rare characteristic could have played a role in causing the current trouble. Although it could be possible, the chances are extremely slim, and no one in Waco actually believes it. Understood everything he needed to. He assures the principal that he will handle the situation himself. He intends to discover the underlying issue and resolve it quickly. He realizes that beginning with is the right choice. The following day, several students gathered inside a dungeon to participate in their training session. The group combined their magical powers, directing them at the monsters lurking within the dungeon. Several of the creatures proved to be incredibly powerful, leaping past the students in order to launch their attacks. The students raced away in panic, trying to escape as quickly as they could. Sprinted by the others and unleashed a surge of potent magic, striking the monster from behind. The impact made it drop to the floor. He instructs the students to keep their positions and assures them to stay composed and organized. The students watched in awe, thoroughly impressed by his abilities, and none of them seemed surprised that Principal had selected him to take charge of biting the cat. With all the monsters in the area now defeated, he entrusts the remaining task of clearing the dungeon to the student. The character turns away and leaves to take care of something private. With urgent tasks finally handled, he could now focus on the true purpose that had brought him to this place. He reaches into his pocket and retrieves a small piece of jewelry. She activated the device, which displayed his present whereabouts. For a brief instant, the chains emitted a radiant glow. They gestured toward a path that led much deeper into the dungeon, steering clear of where the other students were gathered. Suspicions proved to be correct. Something unusual was clearly happening with. Driven by curiosity, became even more resolved to uncover the truth behind it all. In fact, this situation turned out to suit him far more than he expected. No one would question the fate of a student who strayed from their classmates, as such incidents rarely raised suspicion. He planned to inform the others that he had simply discovered his lifeless body further inside the dungeon. Misfortunes like this were frequent in these dangerous places, so he knew he would rest easy, unaffected by guilt. As pondered the mysterious student, his certainty grew that an important secret awaited discovery. His suspicions had first surfaced after the event involving the inexperienced hunters. Following his release from the hospital, his life became filled with non-stop problems. The boys whom had defeated shared a curious tale that sparked his desire to learn more. During his questioning of the group, they pleaded to be pardoned, insisting that the boy, despite lacking any special traits, had confronted all of them simultaneously, and had even launched attacks using several different forms of magic. In addition, despite employing the identical magic that they had utilized, He conjured an enormous blaze, unlike anything anyone there had witnessed before. Found the situation far too unbelievable, and felt nearly certain that the others were not telling the truth. After gathering the information he required from the boys, he departed and left them by themselves. Before leaving, he instructed his subordinates to retrain the group and ensure they realized that the academy had no place for those who failed against individuals considered unskilled. He turns his back on the pleading boys, their cries for mercy echoing behind him, yet his decision stands firm and he has no intention of reconsidering. Before he has the chance to exit the room, one of the bullies calls out to him. Among all of them, this individual had suffered the worst injuries, having been struck by a powerful punch that was charged with fire. He cautions, explaining that has surpassed the limits of humanity and now possesses an entirely different kind of strength. The genuine terror reflected in his gaze is impossible to disguise. To ensure everything went smoothly, arranged for to be enrolled in an exclusive class run by Biting the Cat. Rather than displaying the incredible feats the boys had boasted about, he only managed to conjure a few convincing illusions, which fell far short of the extraordinary powers they had described. Probably relied on a magical tool when they battled, and being an unremarkable non-attribute, he didn't stand out enough to warrant notice. He also believed that the main character must have resorted to some sneaky tactic to handle the beginner hunters as well. Venturing further into the depths of the dungeon, he begins to observe the remains of slain monsters scattered across the ground. It appeared that had taken down these creatures, probably with just one powerful burst of fire. Stared at the evidence before him, beginning to realize that the boy's stories might have been more truthful than he originally believed. Despite witnessing impressive displays of strength, he remains unfazed and presses onward, venturing further into the dungeon in search of his goal. Even who had failed to master the pentagram would be capable of handling power at this scale. At the moment, had no choice but to follow his instructions. One day, the leader of Biting the Cat secretly harbored ambitions to outshine the old man and claim the status of pentagram saint for himself. With this new power, he believed he could seize control of the entire world. The mere thought of it sent him into fits of wild laughter. Despite everything else, he knew he had to keep his involvement with the novice hunters a secret. Remained a persistent problem as well, someone likely to bring even more complications later on. In order to prevent any unexpected mishaps from interfering with his elaborate scheme, he knows he must deal with without delay. The chains guided him into a secluded section of the dungeon that offered no way forward, and he felt certain that the person he was searching for was nearby, just beyond his view. He arrived at the room and rounded the corner, curiosity swirling in his mind as he tried to figure out why it would be found in such an unusual place. His questions received swift responses. He noticed the student sitting quietly atop a heap of slain monsters, appearing as though he had been expecting survival. As soon as he rounded the corner, immediately chastised him for his tardiness and for making him wait. Stood in disbelief, unable to comprehend the scene before him. He had taken every precaution to remain hidden, convinced that no one could detect him. Yet it was obvious that had been expecting him all along, waiting calmly in anticipation. Confusion and anxiety flooded his thoughts as he tried to figure out how had discovered he was there. Before the other person could even finish forming a thought, the main character echoed his ideas flawlessly. In addition to possessing mysterious levels of strength, it appeared that the main character now had the ability to read minds as well. Found himself with yet another concern, trying to deduce the identity of his mysterious opponent. Now that no longer needed to stay hidden, he stepped forward and faced, openly demanding an explanation about its true nature. Chose not to respond to the question. Instead, he praised for being personally selected by, though he quickly added that this achievement was not something should consider especially important. He targeted the newcomers and forced them to hand over their money, displaying the same cowardice as his teacher. No one was supposed to uncover that secret, yet it was obvious that completely understood his seniors. The main character leaped down from the stack of corpses, determined to face his senior head-on. He was well aware that appeared to take pleasure in causing others pain. He remained oblivious to the experience of being pursued, never comprehending its weight. Now, having chosen to oppose, that ignorance would soon be challenged. The main character looked forward to showing him firsthand the fear of being the prey instead of the predator. By the conclusion, he intends to cast a spell that forces to move to his rhythm. After witnessing the day's events, realized beyond a doubt that had changed into a threat he could no longer overlook. He summoned flames to envelop his sword, readying himself for a fierce confrontation with the formidable student. Driven by his ambition, he resolved to overcome, determined to secure victory no matter the price. Not hesitating for even a moment, launches himself from the ground, swiftly moving in the direction of the main character. The assailant rushed at, swinging a powerful blow his way. With ease, slipped out of harm's reach, avoiding the attack without breaking a sweat. He remains completely unimpressed with his lack of skill. In response, he gathers energy in his hand, forming a fireball to launch his own counterattack. The force was redirected straight toward. The older student sliced through the fire with his blade, clearly unimpressed by his abilities. Both fighters seemed to be restraining themselves, hinting that neither was showing their true power yet, and the real fight was only beginning, once the smoke and flames faded away. A sudden flash of lightning streaked straight in his direction. He manages to deflect the attack with his sword, but just barely. Suddenly, multiple jagged spikes erupted from the ground beneath his feet. In a flash, he swiftly sliced through every opponent, his sword moving so quickly that none of them stood a chance. This proved that truly possessed the ability to wield several types of magic at the same time. There appeared to be something unusual happening with his void magic, something entirely unfamiliar to him. While the other person spoke, swiftly moved behind him, brandishing an ice sword and attempting to strike from behind. Managed to respond just in time, raising his guard to stop the attack. In an instant, the upperclassman found himself losing ground, forced backward by, who now moved with greater speed and power. The person in charge of antagonizing the cat was beginning to lose patience. Since the moment had unexpectedly appeared, he had continuously disrupted everything tried to accomplish. Remained completely unaware of his intentions, leaving him clueless about the topic being discussed. His goal remains straightforward. Someday he hopes to rise above and surpass him. Once he completed that task, he would assume position among the 5 revered pentagram saints. Couldn't understand why anyone would select when there were other pentagram saints to consider. The explanation, however, was just as straightforward. The reason was that had once been a pentagram saint, but had failed to complete her training. Aimed to join the ranks of the pentagram saints, so it was only logical for him to set his sights on the least powerful member. By succeeding in this goal, he would secure a place among them and gain the authority to govern the world. Felt completely indifferent, finding the plain and dull plan lacking any appeal. He suspected that could have reached before he did. The upperclassman appeared to lack any real drive, showing only a weak ambition. It seemed clear there was no reason for concern, as someone so insignificant posed no threat to his position as potential killer. Bristled with irritation at the criticism he hadn't asked for, his frustration fueling a renewed, forceful attack as he lunged toward the main character. The two opponents met in fierce combat, each wielding their own sword with determination. Ambitions were clear. He longed for strength, wealth, and effortless charm over women, hoping these desires would come easily to him. He longed for a type of power that allowed him to crush anyone beneath him without facing any consequences. No words were spoken by anyone. If he achieved the title of Pentagram Saint, he would gain the freedom to act as he pleased and might even discover something that could be used against the Saintess. He wondered if he might eventually win her over too. Weary of his rival's constant boasts about ultimate strength, himself to finish the fight decisively. With a swift motion of his blade, he knocks off his feet, sending him hurtling backward through the air. The impact carries enough power to shatter the upperclassman's sword. In addition, his pointless chatter allowed the opportunity to ready a unique magical spell. Shrank back, trembling with fear, while advanced toward him. She instructs him to start dancing. He extends his hand near his face, channeling void magic to unleash absolute hypnosis. Before the spell can truly take hold, he must first weaken resolve. However, after activation, the device would grant absolute command over his adversary's actions and decisions. He instructs to rise to his feet. In a sudden, eerie motion, he sprang upright, his movements stiff and unnatural, reminiscent of a reanimated corpse. The spell appeared to have worked perfectly, leaving completely under his influence. He directed his newly controlled puppet to concentrate on finishing the dungeon mission, emphasizing the importance of succeeding for the benefit of the class. Afterward, he planned to provide additional guidance on the puppet's next steps. Eventually instructed him to speak in his usual manner, pointing out that the way he was talking sounded too mechanical. Came back, but this time he was completely dominated by Swill. As the man turns and leaves, his lips curled into a sly grin. Before heading back to rejoin his companions, he navigated his way through the winding corridors of the dungeon. After searching for quite some time, Karen finally came across him. Concern had filled her ever since he vanished unexpectedly from the group, leaving no indication of where he had gone. Flashed a friendly grin as he expressed regret for leaving abruptly. He explained to her that he had only stepped away to discuss something with. The revelation surprises her because she was unaware of his close relationship with, prompting her to inquire about the subject of their conversation. He explained to her that their conversation had been about finding ways to achieve their dreams, and he mentioned that he had received some helpful guidance. The guidance he received was so helpful that one of his long-held wishes had already been fulfilled. The group of students emerging from the dungeon brought their discussion to an abrupt halt. With the special class nearly finished, it was time for everyone to gather and check in with the group before departing. Karen spun on her heel and began walking back toward the group, signaling for to come along with her. All events were unfolding exactly as he had intended. Now he had successfully gained control of a piece that would never see coming. Came back to update everyone on the status of his investigation into the individual responsible for assaulting the novice hunters. He informed that, just as he had thought, the person responsible for attacking the novice hunters was indeed a student possessing a rare attribute. A first-year student known for possessing the void attribute was introduced. Asserted that was being kept prisoner at their regular spot for torture. At the same time, he was questioning the first-year student, trying to extract details. Through this intense interrogation, the student eventually confessed to having used more than one type of magic. His curiosity was piqued by the statement, prompting him to seek clarification from about the concept of multi-attribute magic. Although the exact details remain a mystery, requests additional time so he can uncover the secrets that is hiding. In addition, the principal had not personally interacted with any victims for quite some time. Wondered aloud to whether he wanted to take responsibility for overseeing the students' torture and interrogation. Typically, matters like this did not catch attention. He thought that doing it a single time might not cause him any harm. It had been some time since he last inflicted pain on anyone, and he saw this as the perfect chance to give the kid a harsh payback for all the problems he had caused for both the principal and. While the conversation continued between them, his phone suddenly began to ring. He instructed to go, promising that he would handle the situation at the warehouse on his own later. The man picks up the phone and begins to speak. On the other end, a woman's taunting tone welcomed him. She acknowledged his presence and expressed her gratitude for selecting her company in the material auction the day before. Feels irritated by the girl's affected manner and insists that she stop pretending. The individual speaking on the phone was one of the Pentagram Saints and also held the position of CEO at Lay Company, known as Lay. She immediately abandoned her pretense, just as he requested, and pointed out that they were both in this together as partners, especially since they were benefiting from the government's generous subsidies. Feeling irritated by her relentless teasing, attempts to cut the conversation short by explaining that he has things to do at the moment, and suggests they continue their talk some other time. She wondered aloud about what possible concerns he could have, given that his comfortable position as the Academy's leader already provided him with a steady flow of wealth. He begins to explain who is and describes unique void attribute. This immediately draws her attention. Since she recognizes the void attribute as worthless, she becomes curious about its intentions for something considered such a failure. He shared her opinion, believing that the void attribute was not something to worry about. He also pointed out to her that, because the void attribute remained rare and unpredictable, there was no telling what might occur. She could easily tell that was still lost in thought. The topic centered around the unique time-based magic that belonged to. The principal always grew uneasy whenever someone mentioned that man's name. The voice on the other end becomes so loud that she has to pull the phone away from her face, overwhelmed by the shouting. Temper flares up just as quickly as always whenever his name comes up. However, she knows it isn't his fault. Once discovered his ability to control time, the dynamics among the adventurers changed dramatically. Having expressed everything she intended, she chooses to conclude the conversation, letting him know that she will reach out to him again at a later time. As soon as the call ended, forcefully dropped the phone receiver onto the table. He felt a strong dislike for their conversations. He always grew tense whenever someone mentioned their previous leader. The sound of that name alone was enough to ignite his anger. Now appeared to be the ideal moment for him to unleash all the frustration he had been holding inside. Made his way to an isolated warehouse hidden deep within the forest, the usual spot where he and conducted their cruel torture sessions on unsuspecting victims. As he approached the towering doors, he pondered the ways he might torment the student. He imagined countless ways to inflict pain, each more cruel than the last. Since he couldn't unleash his fury on, he decided to take it out on instead. The door swung open, revealing a warehouse that stood completely empty. Neither nor can be found there. While attempts to understand the situation, approached quietly from behind, gripping his unsheathed sword and ready for action. The object sped straight towards face. Without glancing back, the principal effortlessly stops the sword's movement by pinching the blade between just 2 fingers. His belief that such an attack would succeed revealed just how much he had misjudged his opponent's core values. Gathered energy in his hand, preparing himself to demonstrate a lesson to. At first, the mention of had clearly unsettled him, but now, after this trivial provocation, his anger had escalated to a feverish intensity. Magical chains wrapped tightly around as he was hoisted upside down, held firmly in place. With little effort, he sends his subordinate flying back with a swift kick. The force knocked him off his feet, causing him to hit the ground while a painful sound escaped his lips. It was evident that had chosen poorly, deciding to confront without first considering the gap in their abilities. It was now's turn to shatter every trace of reckless ambitions, but just as he prepared to give a harsh lesson, something interrupted his plan. A firm voice sounded from behind, mocking him for still being foolish, and followed by a burst of laughter. The principal shifted his gaze in the direction from which the sound had come. Emerged from the warehouse, his demeanor composed and untroubled. He kept criticizing, accusing him of always bowing down to those in power while taking advantage of those beneath him. The older man's behavior remained as selfish and unwise as ever. Remained unaware of the true identity of the person before him, and attempted to point out that the student was actually addressing the academy's principal. Continues his relentless chatter, highlighting hypocrisy by noting that, of all people, is the one most guilty of being led astray by his own selfish wants. That moment pushed past his breaking point, prompting him to insist that hand over his student number so he could face expulsion. Grinned to himself, amused that remained oblivious to his true identity. After all his efforts leading up to this point, he at last reached the moment when he and could have a private conversation. Remained clueless about the identity of the person he was speaking with, but he felt certain that he needed to show a powerful lesson to make it clear just how much stronger he was. He initiates the assault by unleashing powerful magic that draws upon the element of earth. Using surrounding rocks, a massive stone fist formed, ready to crush with a single devastating blow. Usually, a student would never be able to dodge an assault like that. The punch shot out in his direction, launched by his opponent's determined swing. He remains motionless, seemingly prepared to endure the entire impact of the assault. The strike connects with its target. burst into uncontrollable laughter, amused by how swiftly had been defeated. 2. This was the inevitable outcome for students foolish enough to challenge his authority. As the smoke dissipated, not a single trace of life remained, leaving the warehouse utterly demolished and stripped of everything. Began to realize he might have overdone things by demolishing the warehouse, as he now needed to find a different location for his cruel activities. He never had the chance to learn's true identity, yet now he could linger just long enough to witness final moments. After completing what he believed was his task, he pivoted and began to walk away. He then realized that was standing before him, appearing unharmed. The main character emerged from the wreckage with a composed demeanor. He gently reminded that his intention was simply to have a brief conversation, not to start a fight. The principal struggles to comprehend how an ordinary student could withstand his advanced magic and emerge unscathed. Never before has he encountered a pupil with such extraordinary strength. His curiosity quickly transformed into anger as he insisted on finding out the identity of. His lips curved into a gentle smile. He wonders aloud whether has yet to discover his own identity, despite all the time that has passed. Remained unaware of his identity and grew impatient, urging the student to quit joking and simply state his name. His lips curved upward in a gentle smile. He turned to once again, seeking reassurance that had truly forgotten about him. At that moment, observes the student's speech and gestures, realizing that this person strongly resembles in both appearance and voice. The older man recoiled in terror, unable to accept the possibility that had returned. Everyone knew there was no chance that man had survived. The portal was secured with a lock to guarantee it stayed closed. He begins to suspect that everything happening is just a twisted show orchestrated by, so he demands that the student end the charade. It seems likely that had recently watched the latest news piece about, and is now pretending to be tough in order to seem more threatening. The only conclusion he could draw was that no longer existed, at least as far as he was aware. At that moment, began gathering wind magic in his palm. He draws in the power of earth magic, surrounding himself with its energy while getting ready to launch a powerful new strike. Let out a disappointed sigh, realizing that remained the same as ever. It seemed behavior had never changed throughout the years. He went through life accepting only the truths that suited him, choosing to disregard anything that didn't fit his preferences. Weary of constant lecturing, kept focusing his energy to strengthen his magical assault. He cautioned that any further approach would result in him unleashing the full force of his power. Advanced steadily, gathering energy for his own magical attack. By this point, he had already unraveled the man's intentions. He found himself influenced by the flattering remarks of the people nearby. That was the reason he ultimately turned against. Hearing his name pushes past his breaking point, and he hurls a powerful, fully charged magical attack toward the student. Answered the attack by releasing his own surge of fire magic. With just one motion of his hand, he effortlessly erased the force of the attack. As the magic from both sides faded away, the atmosphere became clear once more. Stood frozen in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a student had managed to deflect his spell. In addition, he had neutralized the spell by using the identical method employed to conquer the last creature in the gate catastrophe 2 decades earlier. At this point, any attempt for him to refute the truth would be impossible. The evidence made it clear that had indeed returned, driven by a desire for vengeance. Collapses onto the ground, overwhelmed as memories flood back into his mind. He was convinced they had locked him away in the dungeon, and that could not have possibly survived. Yet the evidence suggested that, against all odds, was still alive. Explained that he had indeed been sealed away and imprisoned, leaving him overwhelmed by hopelessness. Comes to terms with the reality that is truly the one standing before him. The student approached the principal with a cheerful expression, clearly pleased that had finally recalled who he was. His disbelief was so overwhelming that he found himself needing to confirm once more whether was truly the late. Without waiting for a response, the principal rises from his seat, ready to confront him once more. He struggled to accept that the person before him was truly. That individual had passed away more than 20 years earlier, so seeing him now could only mean he had somehow found a way back to the living world. He began to gather magical energy once more, preparing to cast another spell. This time, the intention was to defeat once and for all. He unleashed a series of wind-powered spells, directing them toward the student. Swiftly moves backward, skillfully dodging the strike without any difficulty. Refuses to let him recover, unleashing yet another enormous rock fist that slams down toward him. Despite the lack of any real concern, effortlessly the incoming blow, his movements smooth and unhurried. By now, his frustration had reached new heights as he watched the young child effortlessly sidestep every one of his strikes, appearing completely unfazed and untroubled by the relentless assault. He needed to secure an advantage quickly, since more than just victory was on the line. His sense of pride was at risk, too. During his days as a Golden Seeker, he never took part in battles, and even now, the other Pentagram Saints still tease him about his former timidity. Despite their constant teasing, he refused to let it defeat him. Time and again, he worked hard to demonstrate his resilience, and now he was working on something new that would finally reveal just how strong he truly was. Lifted his hands, drawing in the forces of wind and earth magic. As the energies converged, swirling tightly around him, the light in the surrounding area faded, shrouding him in a deepening gloom. He was about to unleash a hidden spell, a technique that had taken him 2 decades to perfect. As he gathered his power, stones and gusts of wind swirled in the air, circling him and forming the beginnings of a powerful assault. Through dedicated effort, he had mastered the simultaneous use of both wind and earth magic, resulting in this achievement. Once the enchantment reaches full strength, he unleashes it in its direction. Several intense bursts of wind and earth shoot out from his hand, racing toward the main character. They sliced swiftly through the air, just moments before making contact with the ground. A massive blast erupted, swallowing the student in its fiery embrace. As the massive swirl of magic faded away, paused to regain his breath. Casting his most powerful spell had clearly drained much of his strength. As the dust began to clear, there was still no trace of among the scattered rubble. This time, it appeared that had claimed victory. Made no move to defend himself, suggesting that the strong spell had probably defeated him. Couldn't hold back his laughter, overjoyed by the fact that he had single-handedly defeated the renowned. He began mocking the man, assuming he was already dead. She wondered aloud if he truly believed that, even after 2 decades, he would remain the fearful person he once was during the era of the Golden Seekers, despite the formidable power of his control over time. Everything that had happened was behind them now, and it was who had ultimately emerged victorious. 2 decades earlier, during intense battles when the Golden Seekers emerged as heroes to protect the world, had only been able to stay out of sight and gather the treasures left behind for his teammates. Now, 20 years later, had changed. He was no longer the person he once was. He taunted, making it clear that had made a mistake by not recognizing how strong he truly was. After 2 decades had passed, it was only natural that his abilities would have grown. With the passage of time, his strength had inevitably increased. With finally defeated, he became determined to ensure that the other Pentagram Saints would no longer behave arrogantly. He was now set to rule as the most powerful of all the Pentagram Saints. A sudden interruption breaks through his wild ramblings as someone questions whether he has finished at last. Emerged from the settling dust cloud without a single scratch, casually brushing the remaining dirt from his clothes. Despite enduring numerous assaults, he remained miraculously untouched. Found himself at least a little impressed by his newfound ability to wield such strong magic. In his mind, this was exactly what one would anticipate from a hero of their time. Now that had enjoyed himself, it was finally his chance to unleash his fury without restraint. Comes to a sudden realization about the vast gap in power separating him from his opponent, recognizing with a chill that the person before him is nothing short of a monster. He realized there was no turning back anymore, not after all the effort he had put in to reach his current position. Was not going to be allowed inside to ruin everything that had taken so much effort to create. Relentlessly advanced, summoning yet another massive fist of earth in an attempt to seize. Despite the repeated nature of the assault, remained unfazed, showing no response to the familiar move. A hand descended toward, closing forcefully around him. Despite being confronted with earth magic, he effortlessly neutralized it using water. Throughout the battle, continued to shout aggressively while simply stood by, allowing to exhaust himself. None of the blows landed by the opponent would be strong enough to overcome the main character. By now, every effort he made only served to squander his own time. Even so, he persisted in draining his strength, unleashing a constant barrage of magical assaults against. Despite the students' ease, they skillfully avoided each attack and responded with precise counters to every move. At this stage, he is making frantic efforts to distance the main character, driven by his own fear. However, had reached his limit and no longer wished to continue the battle. With a single precise strike, he manages to redirect all the incoming magic, preventing any of it from reaching him. He unleashed a second burst of wind, sending stumbling backward. The impact sent him crashing straight into a tree. Moved swiftly toward the older man, his fist blazing with fire, determined to defeat him before he could rise. Having run out of options, shrank back in fear before and pleaded earnestly, hoping for mercy. Paused, his fiery fist hovering in the air, while the man at his feet pleaded desperately. The man confessed regret for his actions from 2 decades earlier, repeatedly appealing for mercy, despite his outward display of remorse. He counted on deep compassion and kindness to save him from trouble. He believed that if he pleaded desperately enough, would allow him to walk away unharmed. The protagonist simply dismisses the older man, recognizing the deceptive tactics being used. He realizes these are the very same tricks that once led him into a trap in the past. He refused to allow a repeat of the previous disaster. Now past the point of pleading, himself to finish the battle swiftly by setting his fist ablaze once more. Rises to his feet and pleads once more, trying to remind of the friendship they once shared. Yet the moment for reconciliation has already passed. The main character informed the man that their friendship was over, declaring that the man had lost any right to call him a friend. In that moment, the main character saw him only as a demon driven by vengeance. Without a moment's pause, he drove his fiery fist straight into the other man's face. She immediately unleashes a series of powerful, rapid strikes. The man was viciously assaulted, leaving him barely clinging to life. His vision began to blur, and darkness crept in as she slipped toward unconsciousness. He gradually comes to understand that getting involved with was a mistake from the very start. Delivered a final, forceful blow that hurled his opponent backward, leaving the man sprawled on the ground and completely unconscious. Even after delivering a harsh beating, he took care to leave alive. He still needed answers from the man, but for now, his curiosity would have to be put on hold. Since the man had lost consciousness, he was unable to say anything. After some time passed, slowly regained consciousness. Stands above him, casting a formidable shadow. Startled, the man let out a terrified scream and stumbled backward, panic etched across his face. After regaining his balance, he desperately resumed pleading for his life. Urged him to relax, offering reassurance that his death was not imminent. However, in return, he expects certain questions to be answered. Slips his hand into the man's pocket. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone, knowing that his top priority was to gather details about the pentagram saint. Stretches his arm toward his phone, only for to keep it just beyond his grasp. Flips through the recent call history, scanning the screen intently. Based on his recent activities, it was clear that he had communicated with Lei earlier that same day. Insists on finding out the subject of the conversation between the two. Realizing that his life would be in grave danger if he refused to comply, finally gave in. He confessed that Lei was planning to arrive in Japan in 3 days and had reached out to discuss her visit. Lips curved upward as he took in the news. In just 3 days, one of his intended victims was scheduled to arrive directly at his location. This new clarity simplifies things for him, allowing him to figure out his next steps with ease. Afterward, he casually throws the phone back to, and instructs him to interact with Lei as usual for the time being. Despite this, he cautions the man against disclosing any information about who he is. while lay unconscious, cast a unique enchantment on his heart, granting himself the ability to keep track of his condition. If he revealed his identity to her, everything would change in a heartbeat. Felt a fiery sensation building in her chest, as if her heart might burst from the intensity. The older man suddenly stops moving, gripped by panic, while his mind races to make sense of what he has just heard. With no further words, turned to go, offering a reminder to uphold his commitment. In reality, never relied on that sort of magic at all. Given's timid nature, simply pretending in this way would be just as effective as casting a spell on him. He is reluctant to use absolute hypnosis on. He intends for the man to experience utter hopelessness, yet still remain aware of who he is. After 3 days had gone by, a discreet airplane made its journey toward Japan. Lei sat on the flight, her gaze drifting listlessly out the window as boredom settled over her. One of her bodyguards let her know that they were nearing their destination. The flight attendant heads toward the rear of the plane to inform the passengers that they would soon be landing in Japan. However, she is interrupted before she can complete her announcement. She lets out a piercing scream into the microphone when an unexpected event overtakes her. A band of men carrying weapons seized control of the airplane, threatening the flight attendant by aiming a gun at her. One of the men raises his gun, aiming it at the defenseless group, and demands that every civilian lie down on the floor. Rises confidently, showing no sign of uncertainty while the men's voices grow louder around her. She made her way toward the rear section of the airplane. In a split second, she darted ahead of one of the men, seized his collar, and channeling her magic, hurled him to the ground before he had any chance to defend himself. After swiftly taking down her first opponent, she dashed toward the second assailant, who had seized the flight attendant. Without hesitation, she delivered a sharp palm strike to his face, rendering him unconscious. Within moments, both attackers lay defeated and unable to continue their rampage. The passengers raised their heads. Lei stood above the motionless figures, who lay unconscious at her feet. The aircraft touched down smoothly, and law enforcement officers quickly took the criminals into custody, leading them away without any additional trouble. The airport's owner made a personal appearance to express gratitude to Lei, acknowledging how swiftly and quietly she had handled the situation with the criminals. Lei felt a sense of relief at her unexpected presence on the same flight as the hijackers, as it allowed her to intervene and prevent their plans. Because of her timely actions, the plane's reputation remained untarnished. What mattered most to her, however, was the realization that the offenders appeared to have used a unique firearm designed to evade detection by standard security devices. Lately, numerous groups had started equipping themselves with weapons and armor crafted from dungeon-sourced materials. Because of this growing trend, Lei decided she would provide her team with similar advanced self-defense equipment. She rested her hand gently on the shoulder of the owner. She openly expressed her desire to obtain the equipment used at his airport. He instantly grasped her intentions, lowered his head respectfully, and promised to see her wishes fulfilled. After entering the airport and ensuring no one nearby could overhear them, Lei picked up the phone and instructed the person on the other end to let the hijackers go. She had secretly placed the hijackers herself, planning to use that move to eliminate them later and become the hero. By taking that action, she played a key role in finalizing the agreement with the airport's owner. She even received additional public attention because of it. As she walked out of the airport, a crowd of enthusiastic fans gathered, eager to shower her with their affection. In their eyes, she stood as the hero known as Roxy. She returned their greeting with a warm smile and a friendly wave. She arrives at the Adventurer Training Academy. He makes his way to his office, intending to talk over business matters with him. She remained intrigued by the student with the void attribute, whom had brought up during their earlier phone conversation. She is curious to find out whether there have been any developments during the investigation into the student. Hesitated briefly, then confessed that it had all been a misunderstanding. The injuries covering his face remained unaddressed, as chose not to question him about them. Without hesitation, she shifts the conversation to its main topic, having already decided that the student with the void attribute is not worth her attention. remained deeply unsettled by the thought of the spell that said he had cast on his heart. Struggling with his fear, put on a facade of normalcy, hoping to avoid drawing any attention or suspicion from her. Lei set her cup aside, ready to address the core topic she wanted to discuss. The company was in the process of creating a new drug, and soon they would have to decide who would become the next test subject for their experiments. She intended to involve the Academy's students in her plan. Overhears every word of the discussion by using an earpiece linked to the room. He listens to the conversation unfolding on the other end of the call, feeling a wave of revulsion at what he hears, which ultimately solidifies his choice. The following target for his vengeful scheme would be Lei, who would soon be engulfed by the same despair. At home, sat in front of the television, letting the news play while he quietly considered his next steps. The broadcast focused on Lei, mentioning her recent arrival in Japan. The reporters commended her bravery in handling the hijackers who had attempted to seize control of her flight. Remains absorbed in his own scheme, paying no attention to the news segment playing nearby. Lei had been among those who turned against him 2 decades earlier, based on the information he had uncovered through his investigation. He discovered that she crafts unusual weapons from materials gathered in dungeons, and it seemed she had earned a great deal of money by selling them. Based on her earlier discussion with, it seemed probable that she was taking advantage of the school and its students for questionable purposes. Outwardly, she presents the image of a hero, yet in private, she manipulates people for her own benefit. Knew he couldn't simply stand by and let this unfold right in front of him. On his way to school, he wrestled with uncertainty about his next move. Although the desire for revenge against lingered in his mind, actually taking action was a different matter entirely. He remained completely uncertain about how to proceed. Ever since Lei started playing a role in the school's matters, security measures around campus had noticeably increased. At this moment, his only option is to look into what's happening and search for a chance to act. While he made his way down the corridor, approaches him with a friendly greeting as she heads to her class. She spots him absorbed in an article featuring Lei and openly shows her admiration for the older woman. As their conversation continues, she brings up a well-known legend, referring to it as the Great Snake of, and notes its widespread popularity. The Great Snake of was a clan established by Lei, known for its impressive roster of formidable members. The men in black suits who had been protecting Lei earlier were probably members of that same clan. A large number of students at the school were preparing to become members of the clan or enlist in military groups. She turned to him and inquired about his own intentions. At first, he felt tempted to admit that there was nothing he truly wished to pursue. At that moment, he comes to a sudden understanding. He realized that taking advantage of that clan might be just what he needed to approach Lei more easily. After careful thought, he made up his mind and expressed his gratitude too, acknowledging that her support had helped him determine his next steps. He turned and walked off, leaving the scene behind him. Didn't understand what he meant, yet she was still glad to offer her assistance. Inside's office. While the principal is occupied with his work, the sudden ring of his phone startles him, making him jump in fright. He answers the call and realizes that is the person speaking to him. He required assistance from. The situation would come up again the next time Lei reached out to him. At the same time, inside a well-guarded laboratory, several scientists in white coats moved about the area as a student was positioned on the floor. The individual appeared bound by chains, their discomfort evident in their expression. The laboratory door swung open. Roxy entered the room with a sarcastic smile, teasing the boy about his current condition. The student pleaded with her to intervene, desperate for her to stop the others from injecting an unknown substance into him. He believed that if the injections continued, his life would be in grave danger. Lei forcefully knocks him down with a swift kick, then orders him to quit his whining. If the drug trials yield positive results, he will ultimately gain significant strength as a consequence. All that was required of him was to continue serving as their experimental subject. She quickly flicked her fingers together, producing a sharp snapping sound. 2 researchers approached the student from behind. They gave him another injection of the mysterious medicine. The student attempts to plead and retreat, yet the moment the drug takes effect in his body, he begins making choking noises, his screams echoing out in a panic. After a while, the sounds faded away until everything was quiet. The medication appeared to have taken away his ability to speak this time. The drug appeared to be ineffective on lab rats that lacked even a basic ability to use magic. They realized that collecting additional data was necessary, which meant they would have to find more participants for their experiments. To achieve their goal, the group decided to organize a recruitment event under the guise of inviting members to join the Great Snake of Clan. However, their true intention was to attract powerful individuals whom they could secretly use for experimentation. She reached out to by phone, hoping he would recall their earlier conversation about potential test subjects. At this moment, she required individuals adept in magic, so she requested that he select several capable students from the academy for her purposes. Proposed that she organize a selection event at the academy, suggesting it as a discreet method to identify talented individuals and recruit them without drawing unwanted attention. Lei feels a surge of happiness at the thought. She immediately begins organizing the selection process. At the same moment, hung up the phone and let out a weary sigh. He had completed the task assigned to him, leaving the next move up to the main character. The following morning, a guard assigned stepped forward to deliver a message to the assembled students. The group learned that the Great Snake of planned to conduct a selection exam in search of new members. The students felt a surge of excitement at the chance to become members of a well-known clan. Responds with a contented smile, clearly pleased. A new opportunity seemed to have opened up for him, offering a chance to bridge the distance between himself and Lei. A group of students who hoped to become members of the Great Snake of assembled on the school's sports field, preparing to participate in the selection exam for entry into the clan. Lei's personal guard stepped forward, taking charge of the moment by explaining the structure of the upcoming exam and clearly outlining the competition's rules for everyone present. Made up his mind to succeed in the selection exam, believing it was his only chance to join the Great Snake of and approach Lei. He realized that he needed a new strategy with this situation, unlike the way he had handled things with. Previously, he made an effort to stay unnoticed. However, on this occasion, he needed to make sure both Yang, Lei's trusted assistant, and the rest of the examiners took notice of him. He chooses to demonstrate a hint of his strength to make his point. Once the first round of announcements wrapped up, made his way to the seating section, settling in as he prepared for the actual preliminaries to start. Approached him as soon as she noticed him relaxing near the bleachers, and shared that she intended to take the exam as well. Felt a surge of irritation, wishing she would stay out of the complicated situation entirely. Is aware that she doesn't truly fit in with the other strong students participating in the exam. Although she is aware of the challenges, her personal motivations drive her to become a part of it anyway. She was determined to give her all during the exam, and silently hoped that would succeed too. As the exams commenced, the first challenge presented itself as an assessment designed to gauge each student's magical abilities. The guards bring forward a glowing orb, intended to display the amount of magic possessed by whoever makes contact with it. Each student was expected to approach the orb individually, channel their magic into it, and then receive a grade determined by the results that appeared. The examiner, observing the first set of students, found their performance to be rather unremarkable. He assigns the majority of them scores that fall in the middle range. When's turn arrives, he confidently approaches the orb, ready to face his test. He showed his card to the examiner while passing. The man barely reacted to the appearance of a level 30 void user, since he already held low expectations for him. Shattered his expectations by releasing an overwhelming surge of magical energy. The orb began to shine so intensely that its light nearly overwhelmed everyone nearby, making it hard for them to see. From the very first test, his strength leaves them in utter disbelief. As the vibrant lights gradually faded away, left the scene with a composed demeanor, his steps unhurried and steady. The examiner awards him an S grade for his performance on the first test. The following test would assess magic skills, offering students a chance to showcase how they could use their special abilities. Summoned a mound of soil, demonstrating a simple spell that nearly everyone was capable of performing. He surprises everyone even more by forming a sphere of water, an act that is astonishing on its own. After completing the sequence, he concludes by unleashing a burst of flames. With remarkable skill, she brings together lightning and air, seamlessly maintaining control over both elements at the same time. All of the fundamental properties of magic were being activated and sustained simultaneously, an accomplishment that had never been witnessed by anyone before. For a long time, many had dismissed the void attribute as useless, but now its true strength was finally revealed. After witnessing the impressive display, hurried over to offer his congratulations. Now the moment had arrived for her to demonstrate her abilities and show the value of her magic. She approaches a cluster of withered, lifeless plants. She uses light magic to illuminate them. The energy surged through their bodies, bringing them back to life and restoring their strength. The other students found it amusing that her only ability was to bring dead plants back to life, considering it unimpressive and unremarkable. Understood how special her abilities were. She possessed light attribute magic, a talent as uncommon as his own void attribute. This rare gift meant that she could one day become just as powerful as he was. Assessing her abilities would prove challenging for the examiners due to the rarity of her skills. Although he couldn't help but feel some sympathy for her situation, he knew it was safer for her to stay uninvolved in the trouble that surrounded him. Against expectations, Yang chose to list her own name as a candidate for the experiment. Once all the tests have been completed, the final challenge involves each student facing an examiner in a head-to-head duel. The examiners belong to the prestigious Great Snake of, making it impossible for the students to have any hope of victory. The outcome of the battle did not depend on victory or defeat for the students. Instead, each one would be judged according to their performance in the fight. Yang fully understands that, from the very beginning, students never stood a chance of defeating them. When it was turn, he found himself standing before an examiner who appeared tougher than the rest. Earlier in the exam, flashy displays had already attracted plenty of attention. The teacher eagerly accepted the challenge, determined to show that the students' impressive test scores were meaningless in the heat of actual battle. Humble nodded in agreement, expressing his eagerness to gain new knowledge from their upcoming battle. The examiner appears determined to complete the task with a single attempt. The character summoned a powerful assault by manipulating the magic of the earth. Several bullets were unleashed in its direction. The student reacts instantly, using wind magic to defend against the attack. He manages to block the attack with ease, leaving his opponent's efforts ineffective. All of the force rebounded toward the examiner. He finds it hard to accept that a simple student managed to shatter his magic with a single blow. By the time he raises his head, has already disappeared. Suddenly he materialized behind the man, holding a pointed icicle, crafted from his water magic, firmly against the man's neck. The results are announced without delay, with emerging as the top scorer in the exam. Found it hard to imagine that any student could defeat a member of his own clan. He begins to question the true identity of. Later in the day, he reached out to Lei to go over the specifics of the upcoming exam. She inquired about his search for intriguing test subjects, prompting him to mention a particular student who had especially caught his attention. He achieved an exceptional score on the exam, demonstrating remarkable ability, and it appeared that he possessed the void attribute. The moment those words reached ears, she comes to the conclusion that the student is probably the very individual whom had been investigating. Upon hearing that information, she appeared pleased, as though she had just acquired a particularly intriguing test subject.